The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, everybody, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I bet you thought I forgot about you. I never forget about you, my audience. I'm always thinking about you. Sometimes things are just a little funny in my life right now. For instance, tonight I was scheduled to have an interview with Ryan Cooper of The Week. I was going to theweek.com. I was going to interview him tonight about his article that he wrote, his paper, not an article, but the paper, white paper that he wrote over at People's Policy Project with Matt Bruenig about how the Obama administration's housing policies and their housing policies eviscerated black wealth specifically. And our uptime, here in our neighborhood is like 1 megabit per second, and we could barely hear each other. So I had to abort mission just at 9 o'clock. And then I decided, well, let me go ahead and give you what I had for my show. Also, shout out to Nicholas Knight. They were going to join us to co-host tonight. They were in the, ready to go. But again, it was my problem on my end. So as soon as I'm done with this, I have to get on the call with the devil, with Lucifer himself, Comcast, and see why our neighborhood, or is it just me? But I think it's maybe it's me. Maybe they don't like me. Anyway. It's too much control over my ability to connect with you. But here's something that I'm really almost have made a decision. Everything is a very long decision process for me now. I am looking at moving the show. I have made arrangements. I'm doing it slowly but surely to make sure that once we make the move, that it's a permanent move. The move would be to have live shows on, in this case, the live show would be Monday through Friday. I should put an applause track there. Monday through Friday at 9:30. Considering 10, I'm thinking about 10 to 11, but it may work out best for everyone involved, production-wise, to go at 9:30, and that will bring you the high-quality HD streaming with all the graphics and all the bells and whistles, and it is something that we can do consistently every single morning. So you get an extra Friday, you get an extra show out of me. So that's what's coming up. I don't know if I'm going to. I feel like starting next week only because, whatever Comcast problem is here in my neighborhood, I'm like, I don't want to have that problem next week for the show. So, but definitely, without question, we will be doing it at beginning in the new year. Also, for the holiday break, I am going to take a few days off. I don't know my schedule exactly, but I will let you know. And it's very likely, even when I take days off, that I'll still do a podcast like this. Okay, enough with the announcements. I feel like we're at church. You get all the announcements before you can get into the meat, the whole reason that you came. Paul Ryan. We honestly thought that these people were going to wait until they signed, like President Trump signed their tax bill into law before they shifted to say that we have to work on deficits, work on entitlement reform because of the deficits. And here we are. Lo and behold, this man is already making the shift right now. He was on a radio show on iHeartRadio, and he said, well, actually, let me let you hear it yourself.
So you got to have economic growth, but then you got to get entitlement reform. Look, the House passed our entitlement reform bill, our health care bill, back in May. It was the biggest entitlement reform bill ever passed by Congress. Unfortunately, John McCain put his thumb down instead of up, and the Senate didn't pass it. So we're going to have to get back next year at entitlement reform, which is how you tackle the debt and the deficit.
Are you kidding me? Are you serious right now? Apparently he is. He's deadly serious. And this is why I said, I've been saying we can't play games with these people. These people need to be 100% out of power. Here they are adding on $1.4 trillion to our deficit. And simultaneously, they're saying we have to do something about the deficit. Well, listen, if you're serious about doing something about the deficit, then you wouldn't be giving away, trillions of dollars in tax giveaways to corporations and the wealthiest people in America who don't need the money to increase their consumption. They don't need the money to increase their investment. They are not going to pass these savings, these quote unquote tax savings, off into wages, into new jobs. That's clear. The CEOs have already indicated they're going to send this money to shareholders. This is not going to stimulate the economy to the extent that they think it will. Now, anytime you cut taxes, there is going to be a modest increase in terms of consumption and in terms of investment. But on the average, it's not going to. Well, don't take my word for it. The CBO and the Joint Committee on Taxation have already released their estimates that said that this is going to lead to a $1.4 trillion deficit, addition to the deficit over the next decade. And on the conservative end, they said at least $1 trillion to the deficit. And so they are creating the problem, and now they're going to turn around and be their own solution, and they're going to do so by saying we have to enact entitlement reform. And wasn't it Susan Collins who said that she had to get a guarantee from Republicans that they wouldn't cut Medicaid and Medicare? And lo and behold, here we are cutting Medicaid and Medicare. Senator Bernie Sanders on Twitter said today the Republican plan, quote, 1, run up the deficit with tax breaks for the wealthy. 2, freak out about the deficit. 3, cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid to bring down the deficit. This has always been their plan. Earlier today, I spoke with Jacob Liebenluft of the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and I spoke specifically about the Republicans doing this game, playing this game. Number 1, creating a deficit problem, and then number 2, solving the deficit problem on the back of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, the most vulnerable amongst us. And this is what he had to say.
So we've always thought of this bill as part of a two-step. The first step is you pass a large tax cut that has that is tilted towards the wealthy and big corporations and adds significantly to the deficit. What Speaker Ryan is talking about is the second step, which is you use those higher deficits to justify cuts to key programs, not just Medicare, but Medicaid, low-income programs like SNAP, the food stamp program. Right. And that's not a secret. If you look at Republican budgets, that's exactly what both the Trump administration and Republican leaders in Congress want to do. They want to cut taxes and they want to drastically cut social services. And I think that's what people really need to be prepared for if this bill passes, is another fight over the Affordable Care Act, over Medicaid, over SNAP, over other programs that benefit working families, that benefit vulnerable families, and that really could be at risk next year.
So this is a 1-2 step for these people. And this is not a surprise. However, it's the hubris. It's the gall, the unmitigated gall to tell you on Tuesday that we're going to add $1.4 trillion to the deficit. And then on Thursday tell you, well, we've got to fix the deficit. They have no shame. There's no time for games with these people. They cannot be in office. The only reasonable political spectrum in the United States is between the left and neoliberalism. Neoliberalism would deserve to be in power. Neoliberalism, as represented by the corporate Democrats, deserves to be in power far more than this Republican version of neoliberalism. And I think that's something that is absolutely worth exposing here, that people who call themselves fighting against neoliberalism, if you're not fighting against the Republican Party, then you're not fighting against the purest. I mean, like the most radical version of neoliberalism is what the Republican Party is trying to do to us. And so I think the Overton window absolutely has to shift so far to the left that these Republicans are so out of the mainstream. But the problem is this: they have a lot of voters. They have a lot of supporters. They have people who will vote for this bill, even though they know sure as hell it's going to hurt them. They will vote for this bill because they swear that the Republican Party is the right party on abortion. They swear that the Republican Party is the right party for Christian values. That's our number one target, people. We have got to pick off or depress the vote. I don't care how we do it, but we have to break up this coalition between not even Rockefeller. I want to call them Rockefeller Republicans, but they are Ayn Rand Republicans. They would rather have a world of the best of times and the worst of times, where if you are born down on your luck, that's just too bad. You stay there for the rest of your life, while Jeff Bezos is worth $100 billion, while rich people are buying donuts filled with champagne and wrapped in gold, while they're literally buying Louis Vuitton, $75,000 Louis Vuitton toilet seats. This is the world that they've dreamed up. This is the world that they fantasize about, and they're ushering it in right before our eyes. And there are other things that I have to talk about tonight, specifically with regard to the left and our focus, and where our focus should be and where our focus is not. But this is something that our focus needs to absolutely be on. It is our responsibility to fight this like hell in every way possible, in our platforms, our social media platforms, and our media platforms in general, our radio shows, our podcasts, our television shows, whatever we do, and our organizing on the local organizing level. Everything that we do needs to be organizing to put these people out of power. Michael-Slager has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for the murder of Walter Scott. You'll remember the video of Walter Scott running away from police officer Slager, as he was shot at 8 times. 5 times hit his body, 3 times hit his back, and Slager went forth to plant evidence and falsify a report. And had not it been for the video, we already know how that story would have ended. In fact, even with the video, it almost ended the same way it always ends, with officers getting off scot-free. No pun intended whatsoever, but these officers have gotten off. And even with the video showing a man running away from a police officer, no threat to the officer, breaking the law, he's avoiding arrest, resisting arrest. He's running away. So there's possible charges that this man could have faced, but instead, Officer Slager saw fit to kill him as he ran away in cold blood. Just cold-blooded murder. And we saw the video. Every single one of us saw the video. And as we saw the video, we saw a crime that was clear-cut. Some of us thought that it was a clear-cut, open and shut case. But when it got to trial, they charged him. Yes. He got indicted. Yes. He went to trial. Yes. Jury came back. One juror said that he could not bring himself to convict this man. And so it was a hung jury. Michael-Slager then was getting ready to face trial again, and instead of facing trial again, he pled guilty, and he received 20 years in prison. And so it's some modicum of justice for the first time since I've been doing this. There's a long list of names. I honestly cannot begin to name all the names of the people that have been killed by police officers just since I've been doing this media, this podcast. One name I know for certain, and I hope that you know the name by now, because he was my friend. He's the desktop background image on my computer, on the computer that I use to receive phone calls. Corey Jones. He was my friend for 10 years. I knew him for 10 years, and I worked with him every Sunday for 2 years. And we had just reconnected after I moved to Boston. We had just reconnected on Facebook, and the next thing I know, he was dead. Killed by a police officer. And so there's so many names that we can't even keep up with, and so many times we do not get justice, and so many times even when we see a video we don't get justice. And almost in this case we almost did not get justice, but 20 years will suffice. It doesn't bring back Walter Scott. It doesn't take the pain away from the family who lost a husband, a father, a brother, a son. But for the first time in a long time, we've gotten justice. Some people said it should have been longer. It should have been a life sentence. Maybe I'm broken, because I'm almost at the point where I'll take what we can get. I'm trying not to cuss. I'll take what we can get. Because how many times do we see officers get off scot-free? Not only do they get off scot-free, but they also get GoFundMe accounts raised for their money. They get set up. Darren Scott Darren Wilson in Ferguson. It's got a $600,000 GoFundMe account and hundreds of thousands of dollars for an interview with George Stephanopoulos. This is literally what Tupac was talking about. Says cops give a damn about a Negro, pull the trigger, kill a nigga, he's a hero. This is literally what he was talking about all those years ago, and we are seeing it happen right before our eyes. And so for once, even though this guy didn't get the full extent of the law, he got 20 years. And so it's almost something to celebrate. It is something to celebrate, because how rare is it? And what did it take? It not only took a video, it took a jury trial. The juror said that he could not convict this police officer. And that I've already done a video on that, so I'm not going to relive that and run my pressure up, because of how that shows just how broken it is, and how these are not jurors, a jury of our peers. Not for the victim. It's always a jury of the peers for the police officers. And it's always this case in America. You're going to find people who, no matter what the police officer does, no matter how cold-blooded and red-handed, just murder, caught red-handed, you're still going to have people who say, I can't convict a cop when this victim was a black man.
Like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come.
And sadly, some things will never change. In fact, some things will laugh at us in our faces and dare us to challenge it to change. The Los Angeles Times did an article on Roy Moore, and I happen to believe that this is the worst headline or the weakest headline ever. The headline reads, in Alabama, the heart of Trump country, many think he's backing the wrong candidate in the Senate race. And the reason I think that has to be the weakest headline I've ever seen in my life is because nestled neatly inside of the middle of the article is the following exchange that Roy Moore had with the only African-American man in the audience, the only black person in the audience. The LA Times wrote, quote, in response to a question from one of the only African-Americans in the audience, who asked when Moore thought America was last great, Moore acknowledged the nation's history of racial divisions, but said, quote, I think it was great at the time when families were united, even though we had slavery. They cared for one another. Our families were strong. Our country had a direction. Yeah, I really want to cuss this dude out. Yeah, this country had a direction, all right, and that direction was straight into a civil war. But let me reiterate what he said to the question of when was America last great. He said, quote, I think it was great at the time when families were united. Even though we had slavery, they cared for one another. This is who is getting ready to become the senator for the state of Alabama. This is who the Republican Party has reinstated their support. This is who Donald Trump has gone ahead and endorsed. This is the future of the Republican Party. And you mean to tell me that we should be focusing on anything else but the complete and utter political devastation of these people? These people are not to be played with. These people are not to be coyed with. These people are not to be negotiated with. They have a perverted worldview. They have a sick worldview in terms of how they view minorities, how they view anyone who doesn't nicely fit into their Judeo-Christian values. And one day I'm going to split that Judeo from Christian, and we're going to do a video with me and Professor Matt Sinkowitz from Boston College and show you exactly how perverted that relationship is between the right wing of Israel and then the right wing of America. But for now, it's the fact that they look down with so much condescension on people who don't nicely fit into their lily white conservative Southern values. And they look at anyone who's not a Christian, anyone who's not white, anyone who is not wealthy, and they look at them. And even though most of them are not wealthy, I mean, the poverty levels in Alabama are staggering. But you're able to keep them supporting people like Roy Moore, despite the fact that Roy Moore is going to go up there and do things economically that's going to hurt them even more. They stand by their man because they honestly believe that he's more of a Christian than Duck Jones, who fought against the KKK, because Roy Jones believes a woman has a right to choose. Even as I speak with you right now, I'm starting to really firmly believe that the pro-life movement is probably one of the most dangerous movements in America, because it is creating a mass delusion and leading so many lambs to the slaughter, leading so many Republicans, so many conservatives to the Republican Party, for which the Republican Party is going to do nothing. They're not going to do anything for these people. Abortions are still going to continue, because in fact they're going to get worse, because one of the leading reasons people want abortions or need abortions is for economic purposes. But I digress. The point is, this is who the Republican Party is getting ready to send to the Senate. He thinks the best time when America was great was even though we had slavery, our families were together. How twisted and sick and psychotic is this? Well, it's as sick and psychotic as the Republican Party now endorsing a pedophile, alleged pedophile. So I got into a little bit of trouble this week. I can't seem to stay out of trouble. I got into a little trouble with some progressives, and a lot of people didn't like my take on this, but I'm going to revisit it here, only because I have to make a bigger point. There was a boycott there was a movement that started to boycott Joy-Ann Reid on MSNBC. And anybody who follows my show, you can look at my receipts. I'm not a fan of Joy-Ann Reid. I like her in so much as she's a black woman, and I have an affinity for black women, just kind of my thing. I love black women. I love everybody, right? To be fair, to be sure, I love everybody. But black women hold a special place in my heart. I married a black woman, a beautiful black woman, but I digress. The point is this. There's a movement that started that was completely that entire last 10 seconds. I probably can cut out, but I'm sure I didn't cut. There was a movement that started to boycott Joy-Ann Reid, and I'm not a fan of her. She still has me blocked on Twitter, and I've done several videos on her about how detrimental she was to the progressive movement, to the Democratic Party, and to the black community. And, I made a tweet the other day, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't feel like looking it up. It said so much as, I've seen more organizing around boycotting Joy-Ann Reid than I saw organizing to oppose the GOP tax plan before it was passed. And a lot of people didn't like that. I don't know how many people unfollowed me, but hey, it's my take. You may think I'm wrong. But again, it's what I saw. And I have a pretty big perch that I sit on and watch a lot of conversations, social media organizing. And I will say 100%, there seems to be a huge uptick in organizing against the tax bill after the fact. There were some grad students and people have been informing there's a couple things here, there's a couple things there. But what we did not have from the left? And I'm not bringing that tweet up to attack those people who organized it. And maybe I should apologize to them because no hard feelings, right? It was my take and it was my vantage point, and that's what I saw, right? And though what I saw may not have been nice, what I saw may not have been pleasant, it's what I saw. And I expressed my frustration. So even though we're not going to always agree, I wasn't attacking anybody because I don't even know who started organizing this boycott Joy-Ann Reid. But that's besides the point. But I would apologize if I offended them. But what we did not have against this tax plan? A unified, large-scale response from the left. There are a couple of magazines that I shall not name. There are a couple of podcasts that I shall not name, a couple of YouTube shows that I shall not name, a couple of organizations with large followings that I shall not name that never put out a full-fledged effort organizing with each other, all hands on deck. There were sporadic movements, and I think people have, I've seen all of you who've tweeted me, who have messaged me, and I've compiled them all together, and I've looked at them, and still, it does not add up to a full-fledged, all-hands-on-deck effort against this tax bill from the left. And what does that even look like, right? That's really why I'm bringing this up. Like, what does that even look like? Are we capable of doing that? Because if we're not currently capable of having it all hands on, when I say all hands on deck, I mean every avenue, every channel. If you're not like every YouTube, media plays a huge part in the new left. You know, I don't want people to minimize that and say, oh, well, you can't just look at media. You can't just look at the media and YouTube and Facebook and engage it by that. But no, yes, we can. Quite the contrary. This is where we're organizing. This is where we are. This is where we got our new lifeblood. This is, you know, academia has always been there. But in terms of the new movement and the new organizing and gathering together of the left, it's happening online. And we did not see a unified, large-scale effort from the left to lead the charge against one of the biggest giveaways to the top 1%. I mean, this is literally our bat signal should have went off. We should have stood up and and like bats out of hell to oppose this, to show the Democratic Party how to oppose this. And we didn't have that. We had sporadic movements here and there. And part of the reason we don't have that is because I don't know if we're organizing in that manner. There's a lot of divisions in the left, but is there any real connecting threads of people, of organizations or movements that can connect us so that when we all need to hit something together, we all hit it together? A lot of people are like, oh, Ben, well, one guy's tweets were cute. He was like, well, Ben, Mr. Holier than thou, or more progressive than thou, what did you do? I'm like, well, you know, you can Google. You can totally Google. I mean, I'm sure my audience kind of got tired of me talking about the tax plan, how bad it was, and what we need to do to oppose it. You know, but that's besides the point. That's me being petty. I'm not above being petty. I will admit that. But the point is this. We need to connect the threads. We have DSA. We have depending on, and I'm not even going to qualify. I'm just going to name them off the top of my head. Brand New Congress. You have Our Revolution. You have Justice Democrats. You have all those organizations. You have Impact. You have all those organizations. Then you have Jacobin magazine. Then you have sometimes you get some leftists who can write over at The Nation and The Atlantic and places like that. But you have Current Affairs. You have People's Policy Project. You have I'm just trying to name all the organizations I know off the top of my head. You have all of the media outlets. I know all the media outlets. I can name them one by one, but there's no need. Just fill in the blank for all the media outlets. And I think between all of us, we have to represent a few million people, because if we don't, I mean, I know there's like 1,000 of us little YouTube channels and, smaller outlets, smaller media organizations that are just trying to get started. But we have to, between us, have to represent a few million people so that we can get 1%, 10% of our organizations combined to show up in a massive showing to oppose this bill from the left. This is not to say that we all have to work underneath one single organization. Absolutely not. We'd probably kill each other. That'll never work. You'll never see me working with Jimmy Dore on a regular basis. But I would expect that Jimmy Dore and I would agree that this bill is so disgusting that it deserves our full attention and all of our audience to move into action. And the problem is, where were we going to move them into action? This is organizing like 102. 101, we talked about last week, but organizing 102 is like, where were we going to go and what were we going to do together? And I think that is a missing link in all of leftism, this new left. Because how are we ever going to be able to give a large-scale movement? This and again, if you listen closely, this is a critique of myself as much as it is anyone else. Because I kept saying, we have to go, we have to go, we have to do. And then it dawned on me and was like, where were they going to go? Where were you guys going to go? What were you going to do in a significant fashion? Two of you might have shown up to protest at Capitol Hill. But where were the 200,000 going to show up? And so what we have to do in this next move, we have to connect the dots. We don't have to work together on a regular basis. I don't even have to like you, to be honest with you. There's a couple leftist shows that I really just don't like you. I know that doesn't help. But let's just be real. There's going to be people who feel the same thing about me. But when it's the issue like this, It should not matter that we have personal gripes and little idiosyncrasies that separate us, and your tweet offended me and my tweet offended you and all this kind of, well, your tweet didn't offend me, but I'm sure my tweets offended other people. I'm just saying there's a lot of things that keeps us divided, but there has to be a beckoning call. There has to be something that will rally us together. And if it wasn't this tax bill, what was it? Well, unfortunately, we have a few more years to find out if there's something else that happens in this administration that's going to require all of us leftists to come together and show the Democratic Party this is how you resist. You don't resist like the 14 Democrats who today voted in favor of a short-term spending bill, 2-week spending bill to keep the government open. No, you resist by holding the line and saying, unless you hear us out, shut that shit down. But they're not ready to do that. But you know who else is not ready? We on the left. We're not ready. And I'm saying this as much as a critique of me, Benjamin Dixon, as I am a critique of the left in general. If I see that this is a problem, then one of my requirements is to do something about it. And you sure as hell know I'm working on it. One last story before we get out of here. There in Western Florida. I used to work in Western Florida. I've had so many lives, so many regenerations. I'm pretty much, I guess I like Doctor Who so much because I'm pretty much like the Doctor. I have so many different things that I've done in my life. One of the things that I did was I was a teacher and I taught in Western Florida. There's a video that they just released of a CVS clerk who was held up at gunpoint, and the CVS clerk didn't budge, didn't do anything, didn't blink, just stared at the culprit and stared him down. And then the culprit gave up and ran away. And everybody's like, oh, man, that dude is so cool. It is cool. I'm not going to hate on it. It was pretty dope, right? I hope to be as calm in situations. But then I thought about it. The reality is I wouldn't be calm in that situation. I'd be like, would you like paper or plastic with your cash? Would you like, can I help you out to your car with all this money, sir? I'm not putting my life at risk for $10 an hour. Hell, I won't put my life at risk for $100 an hour. I'm definitely not going to put my life at risk for some corporation that doesn't know me, doesn't care about me, won't even pay my wife some insurance if something happened to me. What do I look like, man? I'd give him access. You saw my tweet earlier. I'd give him free cigarettes. I'd give him free. What else do you want, man? Go get a shopping cart. Let's just have a shopping spree. Take everything you want. I'm not putting my life at risk for no corporation that makes more money in a minute than I would ever make in my lifetime. That's probably why I would never get a job at one of those places, but I don't think I need a job at one of those places anymore. I used to, but still. But I mean, listen, people, you don't owe these corporations nothing. Don't put your life on the line for these folks. If you're a cashier, you're working in retail, man, somebody holds you up, ask them paper or plastic. I'm sorry, folks. I'm crazy. I know I am. All right. So, hey, thanks for hanging out with me, and go to patreon.com/the BPD show. And become a patron. And next week, actually tomorrow, I am going to play the episode. I'm going to record an interview with Ryan Cooper of theweek.com. Next week, I also am going to have one of my longtime patrons, Nicholas Knight. They will be on the show with me to co-host. I really like what they had to say on several phone calls they made when they called in. So see you next week, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great weekend.
Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Crazy mother.
If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.